life before Dad Matters was tough. Obviously, myself and Poppy went through loss and bereavement, which is how I ended up getting in touch with Dad Matters. But it was hard to find people to speak to about what we were going through. We had each other to talk to, but finding somebody else that was external to the situation helped a lot. Myself and Poppy had 2 miscarriages in our baby journey. So we originally had a missed miscarriage that was eventually picked up in a private scan. The sonographer at the scan wasn't great. Her people skills were pretty terrible, to be fair. So we sort of struggled through that loss and grief. And then we found out that Poppy was pregnant again, and then had another loss whilst Poppy was at work. So it was a different sort of loss and a very different situation. Poppy ended up doing some counselling work through Petals, who asked whether I wanted to speak to somebody. So Poppy asked me, and I said, yeah. I said, never going to say no. We'll always give it a try. And that's how I ended up getting in touch with Dad Matters. Meeting the coordinator for the first time was, I mean, we've been sort of chatting on the phone for a couple of months anyway. I was in quite a good place, I think, when I first met Wes, and it was at one of the walk and talks, so it was a nice sort of informal situation where I sort of spotted this guy with the Dad Matters logo on, and it was very similar to the phone calls that we've been having, about sort of how I was getting on and how Poppy was getting on and how we were sort of managing and how we were struggling, and sort of just talking things through was really useful. I think the first time you rang, me and Poppy had just gone into Manchester, and I'd forgot that I was expecting a phone call. So I was like, oh, you go ahead, Pop, so I'll be a couple of minutes. So I answered the phone, and Wes was like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, but how are you? And I sort of then switched from this, oh, it'll be a really quick chat, to this is actually going to be a conversation that's going to be useful and helpful. And so we sort of had these frequent conversations where Wes would ask not only how I was sort of in that moment, but how I'd been since our last chat, and whether there'd been any sort of, not developments, but if anything had changed between in our situation, and how things had changed, and whether things were better, whether things were worse. We had those chats, and then, like I say, we did the walk and talk, which is where we met up in Heaton Park in Manchester, and it allowed me to meet other dads that have been in similar situations, but talk about it as well. But not just talk, like listen. I think being able to do both at the same time was a really useful thing to do. Life now is vastly different. We've had a little girl who's almost 3 months old now. We're at a good place in terms of our bereavement. Me and Poppy still openly talk about our 2 losses, and we talk to other people who are going through things that we know. We'll talk to them and let them know that it's not just them, and that it's okay. And I'll always signpost Dad Matters when I can. Hopefully they'll listen. Getting into a good headspace after the 2 losses allowed us to then move forward and move on, and have now a little girl. So as a Dad Matters volunteer, I will go to the walk and talks, sort of meet dads that are at the beginning of their grief journey, try and get them to open up and talk if they want to open up and talk. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they want to just be around other people that have been in similar situations and know that they don't want to talk. And at the walk and talks, it's this very low pressure, relaxed environment, which allows me to then, let's say, help other dads. And then occasionally I'll do outreach as well, where I will go out with Wes and sort of meet other dads that have been through loss, that are then expecting or in a new pregnancy since the loss that they've had. Top tips for dads that are in a similar situation to me. One is that things will change. If you're in a bad place, with your journey, then things do get better, and sometimes it takes longer than you'd hope for, but you will get there, and things will be okay. Tip number two would be that it's okay to talk about it, but it's also okay to not talk about it. You shouldn't feel pressured to speak to person A, B, and C just because they want to talk. If you're not in the right frame of mind to talk, then don't. I think to be forced into a conversation could be quite detrimental and can then push you back in your journey. But if you can find somebody who's willing to listen when you're ready to talk, then absolutely just use that, as much as you can, because it is good to get things off your chest, and it is good to talk to other people about your loss.